slowly but surely Russians are attacking. Even the President Zelensky himself acknowledged this, and we see the constant movement of the Russian forces, along with them performing small attacks from time to time. But Russians understand that at this very moment the time is not on their side, because as soon as Ukraine receives all of these Western military vehicles, this is when it will be just a matter of time until the ultimate defeat of Russia. And that is why they are forced to attack right here and right now, with whatever resources they have at their disposal. But rest assured, this is more of a good thing rather than a bad one, because just in a couple of months, Ukrainians will have a perfect opportunity to end this Russian invasion once and for all. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And in today's video I want to present you all the possible directions of the upcoming ultimate offensive of Russians, and I'll put them in the likelihood order, starting with the least probable one and ending with the most probable scenario. And starting with the least probable direction is that the Russians will invade from the north of Ukraine against Kyiv from the territory of Belarus. The reason why it is so unlikely, it is because it is located so far from the borders of Russia, and this is exactly where Ukrainian defenses are the best, with the most well-trained soldiers. At the same time, the Western countries are also nearby in case the assistance to Ukraine is needed, so that they will be able to help them as soon as possible. There were even some talks in the past that Russia might invade from the north, but everyone, especially Ukrainians, realized that this was just a bluff, with the only purpose is to make eastern Ukrainian forces to relocate to the north, so that there will be fewer Ukrainian soldiers in this area and Russians will have more chances to succeed. So yes, the probability of Russians invading from the north is close to zero. The next direction is still highly unlikely, and this is Kherson and Odessa. And I mean, yes, Russians are still present in Kherson region, but back in November they were pushed on the other side of Dnipro river, and while retreating they also destroyed all the major bridges, such as Antonovsky Bridge and bridge in Novakakhovka, so Ukrainians do not follow them. But at the same time, it will make it twice harder for them to return to Kherson region to recapture it again. At the same time, in the last several months there was still a minimal combat activity in this area, but it was Ukrainians who were predominantly successful. They were destroying more Russian military bases, sending reconnaissance and sabotage groups, and just in general attempting to cross the river. There were even some talks that Russians might attack Odessa using their Black Sea naval forces, but to be honest, I highly doubt that this will happen, because I don't think that Russians will risk losing any more of their military ships, because this offensive direction is most likely not happening either. And I mean, sure, Russians have temporarily occupied Crimea behind them, so that they can constantly send reinforcements, but Ukraine has the entire country behind Odessa and Kherson, and also let's not forget that Ukrainians already have under fire control the northern routes of Crimean Peninsula. And so it all means that the invasion from the south is not like 0%, but it is still close to nothing. And before we proceed to the third direction, can I please ask you to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you like these special episodes in addition to my daily news reporting. It does help my channel a lot, so thank you so much for doing this. Alright, so the direction number 3 is where Russians have pretty small chances to relatively succeed, and only if all the stars align in favor of Russia, is Mariupol, Zaporozhye. One of the biggest benefits for Russians here is that they have almost unobstructed way to constantly resupply themselves, and they can do it by sending forces from Rostov-on-Don to Mariupol. At the same time, Russians were already attempting to attack Orikhiv and Huliai-Pole, but this offensive exhausted itself in less than a week. Last week we also saw a huge convoy of Russian military trucks between Mariupol and Berdyansk, which only emphasizes the idea about the possibility of this direction in the near future. But overall, why would Russia need this region? And one of the potential answers is Melitopol, which is by some military experts is called the key city to Crimea, because whichever country keeps it has the control over the Crimean logistics. That is why Russians would definitely want to protect it. Another reason is that Russians potentially would want to capture Zaporozhye city and then use this settlement in order to launch their offensive against Kherson and Donetsk and do it from behind of Ukrainian lines. I personally think that this exact possibility is infinitely close to nothing, but it is still worth mentioning. Alright, so the fourth direction, which is already looking relatively possible for Russians to at least to try and do something, is Vuhledar and Donetsk. They have long established military bases in Donetsk region, the logistics and defenses is more or less self-sustainable, and just in general the territory is more or less familiar. Russians were also already trying to advance closer to Vuhledar, but so far all of these attempts were repelled by Ukrainians, and besides that, they were able to inflict maximum damage on Russian forces and destroy a lot of Russian military equipment and vehicles. But in the future, Russians might try to attack a little bit to the west and try to advance closer to Velika Novosilka in order to encircle Vuhledar from the north. Then they can use these territories to invade Kurakhove, Marinka and Avdiivka, and after this expand their invasion to the west, with the only hope is to capture as much of a Donetsk region as possible. Because, I mean, after all, the liberation of Donbass region was one of the original goals of this special military operation. Alright, and finally, we have the fifth and the most probable direction of Russian attacks, which, as you might have already guessed, is Luhansk-Kharkiv region. And I'm primarily talking about Luhansk region, because at this very moment, this is where the major concentration of Russian forces is located. And I mean, Svatove, Kreminna, Belohirivka, Solidar, Krasnohora, Kurdyumivka, and of course Bakhmut. These are just a few of the cities that every single one of us have been hearing every single day for the last couple of months. Russians feel extremely opportunistic in this area. The forces are already here, and it will be very easy to bring new ones, since they're right next to the borders with Russia. And at the same time, it is as far as possible from the rest of European countries, which will give Russia just a little bit more time before Ukraine's all the Western military vehicles. And so, this is exactly the area where Russians are attacking right now. This is exactly the place where Russians are putting so much bets on this place. And most likely, in case Russians will be able to assemble enough forces in one place, this is where they will attack in the future. Most likely in their final offensive. Because if Ukrainians can resist this as well, or at least stall the offensive for the next couple of months, Russia will simply have no chances at all to invade anywhere else. If they cannot do it right now, they will most certainly won't be able to do it at that time when Ukrainians will be already using Western military equipment. And to make things worse for them, Russians have already been trying to launch the offensive, and the number of losses confirm this. But just the several hundreds of meters that they were able to advance at the cost of thousands of lives is definitely not the pace of the advancement that they were expecting. And so, as a result, we might potentially see the beginning of the end of this Putin's invasion. But it always gets worse before it gets better. So let's prepare for the turbulent couple of months, wish Ukrainian forces good luck, and hope that this war will be over soon. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to follow until the end of this invasion with me. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.